And now part 2 of the History of Steppenwolf. 1968 gave us 2 assassinations in the United States, and the music being made during this time reflected the bleakness of the war and the social unrest. Now the music took on a darker tone and got louder, almost as if an angry reaction to what was going on around them. Now the music that I've been talking about, this hard rock, which it's called now, at the time it was actually called acid rock. And there was always this drug connotation to this kind of music, which is odd because despite the connotation, many of these songs scored high in the top 40. Born to Be Wild was a runaway hit that put Steppenwolf on the map, but the record company wanted more. Now the band signed a deal where they had to deliver 2 albums per year, so they're already busy working on the next album, and the forthcoming single from that was this song. Why don't you come with me, little girl, on a magic carpet ride? Magic Carpet Ride, like Born to Be Wild, went gold. It was a number 3 hit, number 1 in Canada, and it was written by bassist Russian Mariv and John Kay. And it's got that great psychedelic intro with that feedback of the guitar, so you're still getting the psychedelic vibe here with a good rock song. The first album had this great foil cover on it, as did the second album, called The Second. And it's got this great purpley look to it. I think this is a very attractive cover. Still, I wish I had been kinder. We could have parted just like friends. I can't return to where you're going. Nobody claimed that he was right. The second album gets into a little more psychedelic territory, and I think that's a result of Gabriel Meckler and the band learning to work together more in the studio. Don't Step on the Grass, Sam was a topical song about a drug bust, and Faster was another song by Dennis Edmonton, aka Mars Bonfire. Now speaking of Mars Bonfire, he came out with his own album. She can love, yeah. She can laugh with love for you. La 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 la. And I wanna get lost in Christina's arms. In the night times for you, all the night times for you. This album is actually quite good, and the songs you just heard follow that late 60s pop psych sound. Dennis Edmonton is really a fine songwriter, and this album really proves it. Yeah, darling, go make it happen. Take the world and allow them embrace it. Fire all of your guns at once and explode into space. Faster, faster, faster than the speed of life. Vision clear and never turn back on me. Ride with me, baby, till the end of the day. You probably recognize those 3 songs. They are all covered by Steppenwolf on 3 separate albums. The Mars Bonfire album was released under this cover in 1969 with a different title called Faster Than the Speed of Life. And this album is identical to the other album with the exception of 2 different tracks. So it has a slightly different track listing, and neither of the albums charted. With a couple of hits to their credit, Steppenwolf not only had a very good and fresh sound, but they also had a look, and people got introduced to them on their several television appearances. Now, John Kay often was clad in leather, and he always wore these dark shades, and the reason for that was because he was legally blind. And he had a genetic eye condition that made him sensitive to bright light. So when on television, especially playing live, he always wore the shades. Now Goldie McJohn had this magnificent afro that made him very recognizable, and that was unusual from a white guy anyway. And Jerry Edmonton typically was shown with one of his floppy caps on, and he always wore his round glasses, which he was wearing before John Lennon made them popular. were in early 1969, and their touring included appearances at the Miami Pop Festival and the second Quaker City Rock Festival. Now, they were not new to rock festivals, having appeared in the very first one, and that was the Fantasy Fair at the Magic Mountain Festival in 1967, which was a week prior to Monterey, and they of course, were the Sparrow at that time. Now, the group is already in the studio working on their third album, and the first single off it is the radio-friendly Rock Me.
Just hope there is a promised land. Hang on till then, as best as you can.
Rock Me was the third straight top 10, hitting number 10, number 4 in Canada, and their music was relevant enough for them to be used in soundtracks. And that song was used in the psychedelic sex farce Candy in 1968. We are in March 1969, and Steppenwolf releases their third album, At Your Birthday Party. Now, let me just talk a little bit about this album cover here, because it's terrible. I think I can't stand this album cover. So it's this gatefold with this cutout, and what this artwork is supposed to be is, I don't know if this is World War I trench warfare, but they have these kind of Mickey Mouse heads on top of a lot of the soldiers, and this was supposed to be drawn by artist Rick Griffin, and the artwork was supposed to go over the top of that. For whatever reason, Dunhill didn't want to pay for that, so eventually the CD just has this blank artwork without the cutout. So that's what that looked like. But if you have the original album, it's got this cutout. Now, the photo here is actually more interesting than what's on the actual cover, and they are sitting in the remnants of a burned out house owned by Canned Heat. And I'm not sure why the house burned down, but this is where they took the photo shoot. This was taken by Henry Diltz. One other thing of note is that this right here is supposed to be Michael Monarch, the guitar player, but it's not him, it's the producer Gabriel Meckler. Monarch was AOL for this photo shoot. Those songs are typical Steppenwolf rockers, but this album really has more diversity than what they had on their first two records.
Another time, one time, one another, love each other, friendliness is kind, especially when you're a friend of mine. If you don't say, if you don't say what's in your heart, one more day for you to look.
All right, we hear some balladry on those songs, some country style songs. There's even some female gospel singers backing up in one song. And so it is much more diverse. Now, the second single from the album was this one.
It's never too late to start all over again.
It's Never Too Late stalled out at number 51 on the chart. I love this song. This is one of my favorite songs by them, and probably their last big stab at psychedelia. And that's probably why it didn't chart so well, because it's getting a little late in the game for psychedelic music in the top 40 anyway. But this song boasts some very excellent drumming by Jerry Edmonton. At Your Birthday Party hit number 7 on the chart, which is respectable, but it did not go gold like the first two albums, and the reviews were less than flattering. I think partially because you have a couple instrumentals on here that maybe make the album overall sound a little bit thin. You have a couple different lead vocalists that does add to the diversity that I mentioned, but maybe doesn't sound like Steppenwolf. Now we are on the third album here, and the band begins to experience some personnel changes. And that one being Rushton Morive, bass player. Now, in the 60s, there was a lot of these type of communes and these different cults and different things going on. And apparently, Morive's girlfriend was amongst a group of people that felt that California was going to break off and fall into the ocean. And somehow, Morive didn't want to go back to California. And he missed a gig. Nobody knew where he was. So they had to get a replacement at the last minute for him, and they were able to find somebody, but this got Maurive thrown out of the band. Now, his logical replacement was Nick St. Nicholas, who was with them before in the Sparrow, and he had been with a group called Time. That group had formed out of the ashes of Hard Times. So anyway, Nick St. Nicholas joins the group. Meanwhile, Michael Monarch, who wasn't on the cover of this because nobody knew, I don't know why he wasn't there, but that maybe was some foreshadowing that he was going to be out of the band soon. And he was the youngest member of the band, and sometimes fame doesn't sit well on somebody who doesn't have the maturity to handle it, and that seems to be the case with Michael Monarch. The rock lifestyle caught up with Michael Monarch. He became undependable, and he was replaced by Larry Byram. And Byram also came from the band Time. Tours in Germany and England followed, but they were being pressured to come up with yet another album. So they did something somewhat unorthodox, and they went back in time to get a live performance from The Matrix when they were the Sparrow. And this was in 1967. And this was released as a legitimate live recording by Steppenwolf. I played some of the tracks from this concert in part 1 of this series. And this album, it's got the Steppenwolf logo here like you see on all the album covers, but this is probably one of the worst album covers I've ever seen done. And it's hard to believe that Dunhill actually let this be released as a legitimate album release. Nonetheless, it's a pretty solid listen, and the highlight on it is the 20-minute version of The Pusher. Now, this album charted at an impressive number 29, so that goes to show you how strong Steppenwolf's following was. And it was so strong that Columbia, the former label that owned all the Sparrow stuff, they released this album to capitalize on Steppenwolf's popularity and named it, very strangely, John Kay and the Sparrow. John Kay of Steppenwolf had his beginnings with the Sparrow. So John Kay is being singled out here as the star of the band. And I had mentioned this set of recordings as the album that never came out in '67. That's basically what this is. Now, it's got all those tracks on it except for the best track they recorded during this time, which was Tomorrow's Ship. That's what I named my album that never was, that one that didn't come out. But this is the one that actually came out, and it came out in 1969 along with this live Sparrow album. And this kind of filled in the gap while they were breaking in 2 new members of the band. In addition to these older recordings kind of filling a gap, one fortuitous thing happened for the group, and that is that 2 of their songs were included on the Easy Rider film and soundtrack. The film came out in July of '69, and the soundtrack the month later, and they used The Pusher and Born to Be Wild. Now, this was a huge hit, and this movie signified the first time that really a small segment of the adult audience, I guess, had a huge hit movie. It was a small demographic, but it showed that they could have big numbers. So this album went gold, and it charted at number 6 on the Billboard chart and was gold by January. So this really is the movie and the imagery in the movie that solidified Steppenwolf as a biker group because of those 2 songs being used in the soundtrack. We are in late 1969, and the band delivers their new album, Monster. Now, this is the album that fans are really close to, and I think because the lyrics in it are more socially aware, they're more environmental, and they're in step with the counterculture. So I think that resonated with some fans and set them apart from some of their contemporaries like Iron Butterfly and Blue Cheer.
Runs the religious, the hunted and weary.
Those are the 2 singles from the album, and they both made the top 40. Now, the single version of Monster, the album version goes on, it's like a 9-minute song. It goes into 2 other songs, and that's the obligatory long song on this album. And it goes into political talking points like the slaughter, the red man, slavery, and the draft.
Here's to all the draft resistors who will fight for sanity. I saw that
All right, here's the album cover of Monster and another gatefold that opens this way. You get some artwork like this. And this album, as I said, was a fan favorite, but critics find it a little bit preachy. I find it a little bit preachy as well. And it didn't chart that well. It charted at number 17, but the sales were bigger, so it went gold. Now, I suspect that publicity from Easy Rider helped sell this album. We are in early 1970, and as one of the top touring groups around, they released the double live album, Steppenwolf Live. The timing of this album was excellent. This hit number 7 on the charts, and this was released at a time when there was a lot of double albums out by rock bands. The Beatles had the White Album. You had Electric Ladyland, Wheels of Fire by Cream, Freedom is Sweet by the Rascals, and others. The double album became kind of a thing, and people apparently didn't mind shelling out the extra cash for it. Now, having done 4 sides here, they had some leftover room to put a studio single, Hey Lawdy Mama.
It's all right, hey Lawdy Mama, it's all right. Don't you know?
Hey Lawdy Mama is one of their great late period singles, but it only hit number 39. So with the live album, I mean, Steppenwolf is clearly an album-oriented rock group, and the singles don't matter as much. They need them to help sell the album, but the days of them having top 10 hits are long gone. Cracks in the band dynamics started to show with some strange behavior by Nick St. Nicholas. They had a very prestigious gig at the Fillmore East in New York, and as big as this gig was, Nicholas is showing up late for the gig. He's apparently wearing bunny ears and a jock strap on stage, and that's all. He was stoned out of his mind on LSD, and they actually had to stop the show because he was so out of tune. This got him thrown out of the band. And he was replaced by George Biondo. Now, George Biondo was also from the group Time. That's where Nick came from originally. And Nick St. Nicholas made do by becoming the manager of Texas rock group Bubble Puppy. Moving right along, we are in late 1970 for the next Steppenwolf album, and that is Steppenwolf 7. Here are the 2 singles.
Think he's blind.
Somehow it charted at number 54. Unfortunately, the superior song, Snowblind Friend, charted lower at number 60. Now, Snowblind Friend is a little bit of a different direction for them, and it's their second anti-drug song that they cover of Hoyt Axton, which is more of a mellow hippie song, which is a great direction for the band to go in. Now, despite some poor reviews of this album, there are some very strong tracks here.
And say I lost my way. Nobody would know me. It's a mighty long way out of the darkness to where the sun is free to shine. Hear me holler down the mountainside.
I think Hippo Stomp is one of their strongest album tracks, and Foggy Mental Breakdown features a co-lead vocal by George Biondo. Now, critic Robert Christgau said laying back hasn't been good for them, and neither was getting heavy. Their way lies somewhere in between, which, come to think of it, is how it is for the rest of us. I kind of agree with that. I do like some of the mellower stuff Steppenwolf is doing. It gives them a little more diversity, and they could go soft if they wanted to. And they had the players where they could slow things down. They were good enough players that, they don't have to be loud. They can just be nice. I think you need to balance some of the loud, heavy stuff with some different material. All right, when bands come out with greatest hits packages, you can kind of see the writing on the wall. This came out in early 1971, Gold, their great hits. And there's 11 tracks on here, very cool back cover. And the last song on here is a single that's unique only to this release called Screamin' Nighthawk. These recent singles lack any kind of hook musically or lyrically. So you can see where they're kind of going here, and that is not up the charts, but down. So this greatest hits actually charted at number 24 in the United States, which went gold, number 38 in Canada. During this time, they had another personnel change, and Larry Byram, lead guitarist, left and was replaced by Kent Henry. Kent Henry came from the group Blues Image, and here are two singles from the album.
Ride with me, baby, till the end of the day. For ladies only, half the world has been built upon the tears.
Those singles are from this album, For Ladies Only, and the title track charted at number 64 in the US, 28 in Canada, so much better in Canada, and Ride With Me was number 52 in the US. Now, Ride With Me keeps with that imagery of the biker, and Ride With Me was another Mars Bonfire song, as was this next song.
The night time's for you, now night time's for you. Does the night give you power?
Now, these three tracks I just played for you, now, is it me or are they trying to go in a more commercial direction here?
Rooms unknown and watch for my lost tenderness. Nobody likes you the way that I could. All for you.
Those songs I played for you obviously are more mellow, and one of the knocks on this album is that they were trying to go in a prog direction, like on this song. Black Pit is an instrumental, which I think is very good. And this album was troubling to make. It took 6 months. It took a really long time to get this out. And it's considered a concept album that's supposed to be more political, but focusing on feminism. And I have a hard time believing that, because if you look at the inner gatefold here, we have the phallus car here. I don't know how you have anything feminist in the lyrics, but then have this on the inside. So this is a direction that people say was a prog direction. I think that's a stretch to call this a prog album in any way. There are some hints of some stretching out instrumentally with keyboards and stuff, but I just think it's a natural progression, and I think those were welcome changes. I can understand the critics not liking this album too much because it went away from the rock sound, but I don't understand why fans don't like this album. I think this is actually a pretty solid record, and even though it is a little more commercial sounding, a little bit more mellow, I think it was called for. Now, if you look at Led Zeppelin and their trajectory over their career, you know, by the third album, they're very acoustic, and by the sixth album, they're doing Kashmir, and by the eighth album, they're doing a lot more keyboard work. So they were always changing. They didn't just stay in a blues rock vein, because there's very little place to go from there unless you have hit song after hit song. Just ask the band Free. We are in late 1971, and a lot of bands would probably kill for an album that charted at number 54, which is what this one charted at, their lowest charting album. And it didn't even chart in Canada. That's how ignored it was there. And the band was running on fumes and knew it was pretty much over at the end of 1971. They did a farewell show on Valentine's Day, February 1972, and then they publicly announced their breakup. In the wake of the band's breakup, Dunhill released another compilation album. This one's called Rest in Peace, and it's basically a companion piece to this album. So this has got the hits, and this has some select very good album tracks like The Ostrich and Don't Sip on the Grass, Sam. Hippo Stomp is on here. So these are, if you wanted to start off getting a couple of their albums on vinyl, this might be a good place to start. You get the best of both worlds. Now, it was very unusual to have albums like this that compiled, I guess, album tracks, but another band that did that, the Stones did that, as did the Fifth Dimension, but it's actually rather rare. Now, the band had been broken up. John Kay went and did a solo album. called Forgotten Songs and Unsung Heroes. That charted at number 113 in the States and number 50 in Canada, so that's not too bad. Jerry Edmonton and Goldie McJohn formed the band Seven. John Kay did a second solo album that fared worse in 1973 called My Sport and Life. It charted at the last charting spot on the chart, which is number 200. Did not chart in Canada. Dunhill was not over with the group yet. We're in 1973 and they released yet another compilation. And Dunhill is known for doing this kind of thing, multiple compilations for a band in a row. This is 16 tracks as opposed to 11 on the original Gold album. And all they did was took the Gold album and added 5 tracks from For Ladies Only from, let's see, this album. And they took the 5 tracks from this album and just put 3 on the end of one side and 2 on the end of the other side. So that's all they did. So if you were a little stingy and you wanted to get some songs off of this album but didn't want to buy it, get 16 Greatest Hits. We are in 1974 now, and none of these new bands or solo projects are really doing much. Nobody's got a lot of money. And thankfully, an offer came to do a tour, a small tour in Europe for the band to reunite, which they did. Most of the members reunited, and they got on so well that they decided to reunite and do a proper album. So they did 3 albums. Well, they signed with Mums Records and did these 3. They did Slow Flux, Hour of the Wolf in 1975, and Skullduggery in 1976. And then the band called it quits again. These albums are pretty solid. Quite a few original members are in the band. And John Kay wanted to call it quits after that. He wanted to spend more time with the family. He had just been on the road so much. And the problem there was he realized that after all this time that the people he put in charge of his financial planning, he found out that he was broke. So this was bad news, obviously. And by the late 70s, there was a bogus Steppenwolf going around touring. And this was at the hands of Goldie McJohn and Nick St. Nicholas. And the names they went by were the Sounds of Steppenwolf or the original Steppenwolf. Now, Jerry Edmonton and John Kay sued, or they wanted to sue, but an agreement was reached whereby John Kay and Jerry Edmonton would get a cut of them using that name for their live shows. But unfortunately, Goldie McJohn and Nick St. Nicholas did not live up to that bargain. So that was a big problem, and there was a lot of bad blood over all that. So after the smoke cleared, this is when John Kay basically reformed the group under the name John Kay and Steppenwolf. Once John Kay secured the name, he started the long process of rebuilding the brand again in the 80s and 90s, which he did very successfully. The band did fizzle out there in the 70s, and fans have always complained that they were not inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, one of the great things about Steppenwolf is that John Kay's voice is instantly recognizable, and with that gruff, deep delivery, I mean, he's perfect for this hard rock sound that we've been talking about. The other thing that I find is very important to their sound is Jerry Edmonton's drumming. He is one of my favorite drummers. He's crisp, he's clean, he hits hard, and Steppenwolf would not have the reputation that they enjoy without his drumming in it. Now, Goldie McJohn, his organ playing, added this heaviness to the sound of Steppenwolf, which in the 60s, you didn't hear a lot of that coming from the keyboard. But McJohn's work really helped play off the guitar work that was in Steppenwolf's sound. Now, the guitar players, unfortunately, none of them stuck around long enough to really be remembered. But I have to give Gabriel Meckler credit for really producing and getting the very good sound out of those guitars. And they weren't really a big riff band, but the guitar playing was always very fresh sounding and very competent. They didn't overplay in any of these songs. I think Meckler kept them from going over the top, which a lot of other hard rock bands did during that time. As many of you probably already know, Steppenwolf's catalog of music is very consistent. Now, there's really no masterpiece album among any of these, but there's always consistent songs on every album, and you will find some low points in each album, but generally speaking, I find the consistency very strong. And you could always find a couple good album cuts on every album. So I think that says a lot for their durability over this time. A lot of other bands didn't really produce as good of material for that long. They did have some personnel changes, but a lot of the main core guys stayed. A lot of their contemporaries can't say that. So I think that's what kept their sound consistent over many years and their music memorable. Thank you so much for watching my history on Steppenwolf. I have other band histories coming, several of which are already in progress. In the meantime, if you want to help support this show, I've got a couple ways for you to do that. I've got a tip jar below. You can do a super thanks if it's offered on many of my videos. There's a website I have, popgoes60s.com, where I sell some very fun merchandise. And I have a Patreon subscription that you can join if you like. The lowest tier is only $1 a month. The bigger tier is $5 a month, so you can take your pick. There is a tier for everybody. So those links are in the description below. So thank you so much for all the support, and we'll see you next time here on Pop Goes the 60s.